Hi guys, welcome back. We're going to continue on with the modeling process for our bottle. Before I begin, I'm going to save my file because I didn't save in the last video. So I'm just going to go File, Save Scene As, and I'm going to just name it TVC Bottle 2, like that. There we go. So what I want to do in this part is basically create a thread for the spout or the neck of the bottle up here. This section of the model can actually be a little bit fiddly. What we're going to do is use a Polygon Helix tool. So you'll notice here under the Polygon tab we have all of these primitive preset objects, okay? But there's actually a few missing from this shelf. So if we go up to the Create menu, we can go into Polygon Primitives and down to Helix, just here. So a helix is basically a spring shape. Okay, so I'm going to select, let's have a look. I'll select that tool just as it is. Now, to make it a little bit easier to work with, you'll see over here that the height and width values are set to like 10,000, which is really, it's just a very bizarre number to have set. It's really, really, really high compared with the regular values that you get for most of your other primitive objects, which quite often are like maybe 1 or 2 at most. So what I'm going to do is just hit reset here, and what this is going to do, as you can see here, is going to set it to a width and height of 2. Okay, so it's going to be a little bit more easy to work with. The next thing I want to do is basically tap my spacebar and work in sort of the top view, but also in the front or side views simultaneously. So I'm going to just use my pan tool. So that's just the Alt key and clicking the middle mouse button down, and then just zooming in until I can kind of see the top of the bottleneck like this. Now I'm going to have one here where I can see the bottleneck. The other viewport, this side viewport, I'm going to leave this down here at the base of the bottle. When I create the helix, the spring shape, it's going to create it down here. Okay. So in the top view, I'm going to start off by dragging the radius here. So I'm going to start in the middle of the grid, which is right in the middle of the bottleneck. I can see roughly where the bottleneck is by these very close together lines. You can see I've kind of got this darker area of edges here. This is sort of the top edge of the bottle opening here. So I'll start in the middle. I'll left click and drag out until you can see here that the middle of the spring, which is sort of just to the left of where my cursor is, I want the middle line on this spring to be basically in the middle of the neck opening on the bottle. So I need to kind of position it here. Now, don't worry if you don't get this sort of exactly how you want it, because we're going to adjust this anyway. Don't worry too much about the size and everything to begin with. So when I've got it roughly kind of sitting over the top of the bottleneck, I'm going to let go of the mouse cursor, and then it tells me to click again and dragging, sort of click and drag up to set the height. So I'm going to do that again. I can do this down in the side view. So I'm going to click and drag up like this, and you can see what I'm getting is this kind of spring like that. Now in this case what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to stretch it out like this, something along those lines. Now it just gave me another little message, and basically what I do now is click and drag left or right to adjust how many loops or how many kind of rotations the spring does. Okay, you probably want about 5 or 6, I would suggest. Something roughly what you see here. Okay, in this situation, I've done probably about 6 coils, I would say. Okay, then it tells me to drag to edit the thickness of the coil, or the radius. So I can drag again, like this. And if I hold down the control key while I'm doing it, I can actually adjust it to a much finer degree. And I want to set it sort of roughly. I'm looking in the top viewport at the moment. You can see where the green area is shrinking. Okay, so I'm sort of doing this up here. So as I drag left and right, I can see sort of the inner green area. What I want to do is move that inner green area out more towards where the bottleneck is. Something like this. Okay, so you can see that the inside of the spring, or the coil, or the helix, is actually sitting sort of just inside the bottleneck. All right, and obviously in the side view here, it doesn't look anything like how we want. All right, so what I want to do now is move this up so that it's sitting above the bottleneck. So I'll grab the move tool, and I can do this in the perspective view. Okay, what I'll do is drag up here until I see it appear over here. So I'm sort of kind of multitasking across a couple of viewports. I'm dragging here, but I'm watching what's going on down here. So I just want to position this up sort of like this, roughly in the middle of the neck section. Okay. So what we should be getting, you can press F to zoom in on that. So what we should be getting is the inside edge of the coil should actually be touching the sort of the neck section of the bottle. Okay, so it's not like this where there's a gap in between them. All right, it's actually touching the neck. But notice that it's not really pushing inside the bottle, really. Okay, it's a sort of a fine line. It doesn't matter if you don't get this exactly right. But sort of with practice, eventually you'll be able to kind of get it as close as I've got it here. All right, so the next thing I want to do is properly line it up with the top of the neck in the Z and X axes. So I'm going to come across to the channel box, and for translate X and translate Z, I'm going to type in 0. And you can see I was really close. I was 0.01 of a grid space away from being dead center there. So I'll just type in 0 for translate X, and then also for translate Z. And basically all that's doing is centering it to the top of the bottle. Then what I do is, using the scale tool over here again on the left hand side, I just scale it down. Now notice that as I scale it, the coil actually flattens. So instead of it being a round profile, it's actually changing to more of a flattened profile, which is sort of what I want. So it's actually giving me a sort of what appears to be a thread, a screw thread, like on your bottle tops. So we can just kind of tweak the position a little bit more, like that. And then what we want to do is adjust the overall radius of this. It's too wide at the moment. It should probably only pop out about halfway between the neck and this lip, just here. So it needs to be a lot more narrow. So I'm going to pop down here into the inputs, and I need to adjust primarily the radius, and I think possibly the width values as well. I'm also going to I might leave the subdivision coil at 50 as they are. So I'll start off with the width. Okay, that's probably going to be the overall diameter. So I'm going to click on the word width and then hold down Control and then middle mouse click and drag to the left, like that. Now you can see what's happening. It's actually shrinking the inside as well. Okay, and that's not ideal. Okay, but we can fix that in a minute. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. That's a pretty good thread on the outside there. Okay. Now, radius. We can try adjusting the radius. So I'm going to just click on there for a minute, and I'll just adjust that. Whoops. I have to hold down Control when I'm doing this. Now you can see there with the radius, if I decrease the radius, it's actually shrinking in sort of towards the neck of the bottle. But the outside didn't change. Okay, so that's sort of given me my it's sort of given me my overall thread size that I wanted. Okay, so all you do is you dial the width and the radius back and forth. Let me just zoom in here. You dial these two numbers back and forth. Okay, so you might have to increase one and decrease the other. You adjust them until you're sort of happy with the shape of thread you've got. So keep in mind that the radius will increase the thickness of the threads, but it also increases the amount that they push in this direction. Okay. What you can do, if you've got enough room, is once you've got the inside kind of worked out like this, you can grab the scale tool just here, and you can stretch it up, and that will thicken the threads, but it'll also space them out more. You might find it might pop off the top up here. All right, so you just need to adjust until you're happy with it. Okay, I'm going to go to about there. Now keep in mind as well that the likelihood of actually seeing this is going to be pretty minimal unless you actually do a render of the object with the lid turned off. So don't worry about it too much. It's not absolutely vital that this is exact, because really for most of your renders you would probably never even see this section. It's just handy to have, as I said, if you want to do a render with the lid off. Okay. So now what I want to do is I want to fix this little end piece here. I don't want it to stop sort of abruptly as a kind of just a blunt ended thread. Normally what happens is this section will taper in to the towards the surface of the neck here. So I basically just want to round that out. Now around the other end what I've done is just kind of push this down so that the end of the helix down here actually just pokes in through the bottom of the little lip just there, and you can see up here that this is sitting just inside the top of the bottle. Okay, so just kind of tweak those settings back and forth, width and radius over here in your inputs, and the position of the object as well, just so you get it how you want it. Alright, so let's adjust these now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on the object and select Vertex Mode, so holding down the mouse button while I'm doing this. Okay, and I'm going to select these three vertices just here on the outside end of the helix. I'll turn the move tool off just for a second, just so it doesn't get in the way. So holding shift down, I'll just click on those three. Now you'll notice here at the moment that the end of the helix is actually level with the x-axis. If I look down here, I can see the x-axis points directly to the right. And this is directly at the right-hand middle point of the helix. So this is pretty much lined up. If I turn the move tool on here, I can actually take this section and move it in like this. Okay, I can then grab the other vertices in here, and I can also kind of push those in as well. What I'm going to do with this is actually, let's have a quick look here. I think kind of what I want to do is blunt these off a little bit. You'll notice here at the moment they're kind of very sharp. So I think what I'll do, before I start shifting anything else around, I'll select Edge Mode for a minute, and I'll double click on this outer edge. You can see what it's doing there is it's selecting right around the coil, okay, all the way down to the bottom. If I grab Scale, I can then hold down Control and grab the Y-axis cube, which is the green one, and I can push up. And what it's doing is actually scaling the overall width of the coil, but it's not making it taller and or shorter. So all it's doing is kind of pushing them in, and what that's doing is just kind of blunting the edges of those threads off a little bit like that. So now I can continue to kind of adjust these in here. So I'll just grab Vertex Mode again. I'll turn off the scale tool as well. And I'll grab these ones as well now. So using the move tool, I'll just push those in just inside the surface of the object, and then I'll just select these three here and just push those in like that. Now it doesn't have to go all the way in, okay, sort of just to there would be fine. Now I'm going to sort of do a similar thing to these ones here. Now the issue is that if I select these three here and I look in the top view and I press F to zoom in on them, you'll notice that the direction that this edge is facing in is not the same direction as the tool is facing in. So if I start pushing this in, you can see it's going to start to angle away. What I want to do is kind of push it in back in this direction. So what I can try and do, we'll see if this works first. If I come across to the tool settings and select Normal's Average, yeah, you can see here it's actually not lined up the direction I want. Sometimes Normal Average will actually set, oops, I'll just press F to center that. Sometimes what it'll do, the reason it's not doing it at the moment is because of this angle here. What it can do sometimes, like if I grab these three vertices, you can see that that one's actually angled directly in towards the middle. Okay, this one's not doing it because of this angle I've already made. So what I'll have to do here is manually position the handle and set it to this edge. So what I'll do is click the Set to Edge button. Don't forget this is in Tool Settings, and these tabs are active using the toggles up here. I'll click Set to Edge and then click on this edge just here, and the handle will line up with that edge like that. Okay, now unfortunately, because that edge is also on an angle, it's going to kind of throw this a little bit out of whack. Okay, it's not ideal, but it's pretty close. So I'm just going to drag that in like that. And if I have a look at it from the side view, I can kind of see that it's actually kind of moved down a little bit. You can see that these edges kind of angle off. So if I press Reset, I can then just drag this up a little bit until the edges line up a little bit more again, like that. Now I can repeat that process a couple more times, but I move the edges in less and less every time. Okay, now the other way of doing it, we can do it just directly in the top view, like this, and you just do it by eye. Okay, you just roughly position it like this. So what I'm doing, essentially, is I'm kind of tapering the top of this thread off a little bit. Okay, so I can take these ones and just adjust them a little bit. Press F to zoom in on the selected vertices. So I'm just kind of pop them in like that. And you only have to do a few, just like that. Okay, and you don't have to worry about the bottom because it's kind of buried in this this lip here. So once you've got that kind of position, just hold down the right mouse button on the object, select Object Mode. If you select it, you can press 3 on the keyboard, and that smooths it out. You can kind of have a look at what it looks like when it's smooth. So you can see there, that's the sort of the basic thread. Now that's a little bit thin, okay, for my liking, sort of just looking at it now in relation to the entire bottle. It's probably a touch thin. So what you would do there is have less coils on your object. So instead of it going around about like 5 or 6 times, you might only do it maybe 4 times, 4 or 5 at most. And that way you can keep the thread a bit thicker than it is. Okay, but you know, it's not absolutely necessary, as I said before. Okay, so the last thing I'm going to do in this video is just create a quick cap for this. So I'll tap my spacebar again, and let's have a look here. Just going to position the viewports the way I had them the last time. So bottom of one side, top of the other, and then the top of the bottle in this top view. I'm going to select a polygon cylinder just here. And once again, starting in the middle of the grid, I'm going to click and drag a cylinder out. Now at this time, at this moment, it doesn't really matter how many sides or divisions this cylinder has. I'm then going to click and drag up to set a bit of a height. You can see that occurring down here. And then I'll move it up into position at the top of the cylinder, like this. So what we want is, first of all, the cylinder centered. So I'll click on the channel box and I'll set translate X and Y, X and Z to 0. Leave translate Y as it is. If you set that to 0, the lid will jump back down to the bottom of the bottle, and we don't want it down there at the moment. Okay, so I'm going to pop this down here, like this, and I'll open the inputs for poly cylinder 1, and you can adjust the height just here. So just click on the word height and middle mouse drag in a viewport to adjust the height, and then you can reposition it using the move tool. Now, so you can see what's going on a little bit more clearly here, what I'm going to do is press smooth shade all, which is 5 on the keyboard, and I'll click X-ray so you can kind of see through the object as well. So I'm just moving this down a little bit. You can kind of see the sort of the overall size. I want to shrink this down just a fraction here. Now, normally there'd be a bit of a plastic ring around the bottom of this, sort of in this area. So I'm going to leave a bit of a gap, and what we'll do is shrink the radius down a little bit. So I'm going to click on radius, hold Control down, and middle mouse click and drag in a viewport, just a little bit like that. We only need to sort of just go a bit wider than the threads. Okay, and you can kind of keep tinkering with the radius a little bit if you like. Alright, I'm going to right click and hold on the object and select Vertex Mode. Drag a box across the vertices at the top, and using the move tool, I'm going to move these down like this. I don't want them too high above the top of the bottleneck. Okay. Next thing I want to do is I want to right click and hold on the object and select face mode, and I just want to select all the polygons on the top of the lid. Now, quickest way of doing this is to actually drag a box in the side view here, or front view. Just drag a box so it goes across the top part of the lid like this. Now what that'll do is select the top and all the sides. At this point what we can do is deselect the sides by holding Control and dragging a box through the middle of the lid like this. And that will leave the polygons on the top selected. Next thing I'm going to do is grab Extrude, and just double check that Keep Faces Together here is ticked in the Edit Mesh menu. Once again, if this isn't ticked now, what you'll need to do is deselect everything, tick this, and then reselect these polygons. So I'm going to grab Extrude, and I'm going to drag up a little bit, and then increase the offset a little bit, like this. And then I'm going to repeat that. So click Extrude again. This time I'm just going to go up a little bit like this, not as far as I did before, but I'm going to increase the offset more, like this. So what we're getting is a slightly, ever so slightly domed top on this lid. Finally, I'll turn that tool off, right click and hold on the object, select Vertex, grab the vertex in the middle, and just use the move tool and move that up just a fraction, like that. And that's going to kind of narrow the top off. 4 is a bit. Okay, just right click and hit object mode, deselect. Okay, and you can see that we've got just a little lid there now. So finally, I'm just going to create a small pipe and fit it in this little gap in between the lip and the lid. Usually there's like a little plastic piece that fits in there. You can either do a pipe, or what you can do is just select the object, grab Vertex Mode, just grab the vertices at the bottom and move those down. Okay, you can do it either way, it's not going to really matter. With the pipe, really all you would do in that situation is grab your Polygon pipe tool, and once again, like we did earlier, just click and drag in the middle of the grid. Click and drag up a little bit to set the height, which I'm looking at down here in the side view, down here, and then click and drag to edit the thickness. So I'm just going to drag left or right. Now, once again, this object is defaulting, or this tool is defaulting to like 1,000 or something. The thickness is setting to 100. So what I'm going to do is just pop into the inputs and change this manually over here. I'm going to start the thickness at 0.5, so that's like half a grid space, which you can see here. And then what I can do is just click on the word thickness, and I can middle mouse click and drag with Control held down until the pipe edge disappears into the neck of the bottle, like that. Now I need to move this up, so I'll grab the move tool and I'll just move it up like this and just position it in here like this, just above that lip. And then the radius basically gets doled out slightly wider than the bottle lid. Okay, and set the translate X and Z to 0, like that. So if you've got this little neck, okay, what you can do is leave the vertices on the cap sort of just above it, like this. So it looks like that. Okay. But if you don't want to do this ring, you can just grab the vertices that I changed and you can just move them down. It's not going to matter one way or the other. Okay. So that's basically that's more or less the main part of the bottle completely modeled. There's not really anything else we would need to do. We'll do a little bit of cleanup later on, but for now what we'll do is we'll just lock a few things off. So the first thing I'm going to do is select the lid, and I want to reset this so that the object is placed here more or less permanently. So I'll just turn off the move tool. I'll come up to modify, freeze transformations, and that'll freeze this off. All right. I then do the same for this little ring if I've modeled that. So modify, freeze transformations, and all that's doing is it's keeping this object where it is, but it's setting that back to 0. Now the bottle should already be all zeros, which you can see here, so the bottle is fine. So it's really just those little additional objects that we've made. So that's basically our soft drink model, like 90% modeled. Okay, so there we go. We'll finish up and we'll just save the file. So I'll just go File, Save Scene As, grab the bottle file and change number to 3. And press save.